Whether you're renting costumes or you've purchased your own, costumes tend to come with their own set of rules. And that is our topic for today. Some general costume guidelines are the ones that we have always posted in our handbooks. Regardless of how you've gotten your costume, like I said, if you've purchased it or it's being rented, you never want to place your costume on the ground. Simply, you don't know what's there, and you don't want to all of a sudden find a stain or have something sticky on it. Just don't do it. For those who have rented costumes, odds are there is some kind of sign in, sign out procedure with your studio. Same thing too for making sure that there's any repairs or damage that may have occurred, whether you're renting it. If it's your own costume, you want to make sure that everything is in working order, and if any repairs need to be done. At our studio, I've always asked that dancers bring their costumes to me regardless, because if any alterations need to be made for the class, I would prefer that they all match instead of everybody doing kind of their own alterations to costumes. Again, you want to make sure that deodorant is kind of kept to a minimum for the most part. Obviously, we don't want to be stinking, but you do need to make sure that you're not really caking it on, or any kind of antiperspirant for that matter, because if it's a sequined costume, the deodorant can actually eat away at the sequins. It can also just cake up and build, and if you're leasing out costumes, that can be really detrimental for them being maintained properly over the years. So just kind of keep that in mind. There are also usually undergarments that need to be worn or not. Going back to other conversations, our tights and our leotards are typically our undergarments. If you're doing quick changes and everything, that's where, at least for us, I always require that our dancers have nude undergarments of some kind, or I even go to the extreme where I will build and design our costumes off of a black leotard, because we have everybody changing in such a small area. We want to make sure that everybody's covered. So keep that in mind and find out whatever your studio policies may be as to how that is handled. Oftentimes people have to change right off stage in the wing, and we want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with quick changes and everything. So we want to just make sure bodies are fully covered. Not to mention, if we're renting costumes, we want a barrier in between just as an extra layer of precaution, so we can keep using costumes for different bodies. Even though our costumes, I can tell you firsthand, go through a very thorough disinfection and sanitation process before they are in use again. But even still, I require those undergarments just to make sure that we are having even more of a safety line in there. That being said, if, say, you have your own costume, most studios and dancers, again, if you have to wear something underneath, it should be nude. Nobody wants to be seeing what colorful designs or characters you may be having on your undergarments. So, with that being said, oftentimes you will find that studios say that they don't want you to wear anything aside from your tights. Others will say that you need a leotard and tights. Others will even say that you need the nude undergarments. Again, these are all things that are not uncommon. Just make sure that you find out what your studio policies are. When it comes down to renting costumes, don't be alarmed if there are extra charges if costume pieces get lost or damaged in especially negligent ways. It's up to you to make sure that these items are oftentimes able to be used by future generations of dancers. So it's just a respectful thing. Same thing for if you're having your own costumes. You are responsible for making sure you have all the parts. It's not really acceptable just to be losing items. So you want to make sure that you keep everything organized and detailed, and how your director or instructor may respond to that. Just don't be alarmed if they are none too pleased should you lose things. Almost every show, dancers are required to remove jewelry. There are occasions, however, where the jewelry may be part of your costume, but that is something that is to be discussed beforehand. Especially with costumes, jewelry can easily get caught on items. If you're dancing in close proximity to others, jewelry can also become hazardous. I have been smacked by rings before, I've been smacked by bracelets. I have seen dancers get necklaces caught around their necks because they start sweating and things like that, and that's just in class. When you're out on the stage, if you have sequins or really fine material that you have to feed your hands through, or again, you're in close proximity to others, you don't want to be a moving hazard for them. And so you want to make sure that everything is removed. I myself, I obviously have like my nose pierced and my ears are pierced. All of that goes unless if I need those jewelry items for a show, which has happened before. If for some reason I have had some dancers who have made requirements in regards to certain rings, then I ask that at least at the time that we have covered them up, again with skin toned tape, and make sure that it's padded so it does not inflict injury on others and it is less noticeable. I understand that some of that comes down to religious mindsets, and so we obviously want to be respectful of that as well. And so I'm not beside making certain exceptions. Obviously, if people are doing it in excess and it does not have a fundamental basis for it, I'm a little less persuasive in those regards. Same goes for those who get freshly pierced ears. More often than not, you've known the show is coming. Plain and simple. My note to that, whether you're dancing with us or for anybody else, you want to make sure that you kind of plan fresh piercings accordingly. You want to make sure that your director would approve such a thing, because usually you can't take them out. And I've had dancers who try to sneak that under the radar and think that I don't actually notice these things, which usually kind of internally frustrates and humors me. But you need to make sure that you kind of get that approval ahead of time, just out of respect for your instructors and directors. They may even ask that you hold off until after a show. It depends on what kind of show you are doing. So you do want to keep that in mind instead of trying to alter appearances. That same can actually be said for dyeing of hair. You should always be asking your instructor or director prior to a show if you are okay to dye your hair, because that can be a challenge with costumes and how everybody looks. I've had dancers ask me to dye their hair, and I've actually totally made that part of the show before because of the show that we were working on at the time. I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Other context, that's not always the case, and so you got to kind of work with that. Same thing goes for tattoos. Tattoos are awesome, but don't be surprised if your director asks that you cover it up in some way, or they may be like, no, that totally works as part of the costume. All of this is done out of respect. It's not trying to make your life difficult. It's just usually there's a reason why things are happening for a show. Everyone's trying to make sure that there's a uniformity between all the dancers, and we just want to make sure that no matter where you're dancing, who you're dancing for, you're being respectful of all of those nuances, and all of that falls under your costume guidelines because it changes your appearances. I will see you tomorrow when we talk about how to pack our dance bags for the show. I will see you then.